be covering. In introduction, I'm going to go over what an IDE is and what a text editor is and the differences between them. We're going to cover Vim, Xcode, Cloud9, Visual Studio, and then we're actually going to code in Visual Studio. I'm not going to use any of these except for Visual Studio, but on the handout I just handed out, there's a link to YouTube videos on how to use them, how to run your code in these IDEs, how to compile, and how to debug. Alright, so let's get into it. So what is an IDE? IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment, and they're basically just software applications used by programmers to develop code. They usually contain like a debugger and a compiler within them, so they're a bit heavier than a common text editor. It's important to know the difference between an IDE and a text editor. Here are some common text editors. Yeah, you have a question?
Is there a difference between an IDE and an SDK?
An SDK? Yes. An IDE is the environment. A software development kit's usually like a package they use to code whatever you're trying to code for support. IDE is more of like the interface, the graphical user interface that you use to code.
And the kit just helps you code, right?
Yeah, the kit usually contains a bunch of libraries that'll help you code whatever, usually like Android or C++. So here's some common text editors. You guys are probably all familiar with gedit because I know some of the CSE professors make you use it. There's Vim. There's Notepad++ for Windows. Very powerful, very lightweight, very simple. And these usually look something like this. Like they're blank slate, no big bells and whistles. You just start typing. And it's kind of refreshing when compared to IDEs. So here are some more popular IDEs. So you guys recognize any of these? We have Visual Studio, Android Studio, Eclipse, Xcode, PyCharm for Python. That's for Android Studio is for Android development. Xcode is for iOS development. And then NetBeans, just Java applications. And these might look something like this. So there's a lot going on, and at first glance you might be scared and not want to use it because it just looks like a mess. But most IDEs have basic structural patterns that we're going to cover in a bit. So this is what an IDE looks like. Does anyone know what IDE this is? Yeah, Android Studio, you got it. Alright. So some common features IDEs boast are IntelliSense. So this is something you guys are missing out on when you use gedit. So you can start typing in a function name and a list will generate showing you what functions exist with those characters. So this can help you find functionality that you may have not knew ever existed, which is really cool. So it's basically like autocomplete. Then we have real-time error checking. This is a bit different than syntax highlighting. It's when the IDE discovers, oh, you've made a mistake. The syntax is correct, but there's something wrong. So it'll catch it before you run and compile your code, save you all that time of having to go back. It's like, what's wrong with my code? See, as you can see here, somebody forgot a semicolon, and here somebody forgot to call the correct variable. They called it num1. It's num. And yeah, so IDEs will catch that. Key commands. So a lot of text editors have their own key commands, but the benefit in using an IDE is that you can use the graphical user interface to do it for you. You don't have to know the commands by heart. So here, an example here is quick commenting. There's a button for that. All you have to do is click it and find and replace. So if you wanted to replace all the variables named num with val, all you have to do is find and replace. Super simple. There's a button for that. Alright, and then integrated compiler and debugger. So you don't have to type in G++ or GDD. All you have to do is click a button and it will compile and run your program, which is amazing. And same with debugging. Usually all you have to do is set a breakpoint and click debug. And then from there you can use the interface to step through your code, which is very, very powerful. Again, this is just an example of an IDE. So at the top here we have like a navigation bar where all the bells and whistles are. On the left we have our file explorer with all the directories, all the files that go into your program. So in this case they're using Java, so they have a bunch of Java. And then here is where you code all that. So it's like the text editor in the IDE. So you just click on the files, they open up here, and then using the nav bar you can like run your program, you can debug it, and the output will usually come out here in the console window. So this is where you'll input stuff, this is where you'll output stuff, this is where you'll see all your bugs. Does anyone know what IDE this is?
Oh,
Yeah, it's Eclipse. Good job. Next time I'm going to bring candy. And you're going to get all. Alright, so the first thing we're going to cover is actually not an IDE. It's a text editor. It's called Vim. So Vim is a very, very powerful text editor that you can use within your terminal, which is what makes Vim so powerful. You don't have to install anything on Linux or Mac. You can just open up terminal and use Vim. And at a certain point in your bash career, you may feel something like this. You're on top of the world, you have complete control over all your code. But for others who are new to Vim, Vim can come as somewhat of a challenge. Because on top of trying to, so Vim, you have to have a Linux or a Mac machine, right? And a lot of kids these days, they have a Windows machine. So on top of learning a whole new programming language, you guys are having to learn a whole new operating system, which is difficult and can leave you feeling something like this. So that's why I've created this workshop, so you guys can learn to code C++ in the comfort of your operating system of choice with ease. So in Windows and in Mac. So this is an example of Vim. I'm not actually going to open Vim, but maybe at the end, if you guys want to see it, I can show it to you. And if you wanted to use Vim, all you would need to do is type in Vim in terminal, and it'll open up and you can start coding away. And at the bottom of the IDE help page or handout, there's a link, a YouTube link that'll go into detail on how to run and compile and debug your code in Vim. So if you guys want to learn more, you can use that. So let's hop into our first IDE, which is Xcode. So Xcode is the go-to IDE for Mac users. Xcode is Apple's IDE for app development, for iOS development, and uses the Swift programming language. I would recommend to use Xcode if you have a Mac and you're interested in app development. It's free, but nothing says proprietary like Apple. So Xcode is the only IDE on the list that is not cross-platform, so you will need to have a Mac, or you can run a virtual machine, but that's not very efficient memory-wise. Nonetheless, Xcode is a very powerful C++ IDE and is free to boot. I recommend you guys check it out. Also, on the YouTube link, there's a guide on how to run, compile, and debug your code using Xcode. So, and then this is what Xcode looks like. Very simple. You have the file structures, console output, and text editor. Alright, so the next one on the list is Cloud9. So portability is what you need. Look no further. If you don't have access to a Linux machine and you don't particularly like PuTTY or WinSCP, I would recommend you use Xcode for all your classes. We don't deserve Xcode. Xcode is an IDE, a cloud-based IDE developed by Amazon Web Services that you can access on any browser. So you can access it on a Chromebook, on a MacBook, on a Windows machine, any machine, on your phone. Xcode is very cross-platform. So again, there's a link on the workshop handout to Xcode or Cloud9, where you can and the video shows you how to run, compile, and debug your code in Cloud9. So C9, so Cloud9 is the Google Docs of IDEs. So you can add your friends to it, and you can all be coding and looking at the same code at the same time. So if they change a particular section in the code, you'll see that in real time, and they can chat with you, and it's amazing. So you can run, you can compile the code together, and if that didn't, yeah?
What IDE is this?
Cloud9. Oh, I keep saying, do I keep saying Xcode?
No, it's just I was thinking. But I never knew Cloud9 could do multiple users at once, right?
Yeah, it's super cool as long as you have an account. The only downside is that when you do first create your account, they will ask you for your credit card info, but you won't have to pay anything unless you're paying for a premium account. But it's Amazon, so they're pretty trustworthy. And then you only have one free private repository. Every other repository after that has to be public. So that's another downside. But I mean, you're doing classwork, so you don't really need to keep it private. One's enough. So, and if that didn't convince you enough of how amazing Cloud9 is, it has its own terminal. So you can actually SSH into the school's computers using Cloud9's terminal. You can compile and run. You don't even have to use the graphical user interface. You could just use terminal, use Vim in Cloud9, it's amazing. It's great for new coders here because they can see a file structure of their project as well as see the terminal and code from home at the same time. So Cloud9's great. You guys should check it out. So this is what Cloud9 looks like. So all your files and file structures on the left. This is your text editor where you code stuff. You just hit run to run your code and all the console output, and it goes here and debug. The bugs show up here. And then you can just hit collaborate. You can share it with friends. You can chat with them. They can see your code in real time. They can run it with you. You can open up, if you click on Window, Terminal. And if you guys want to know more about this, there are links on the handout. Oh yeah, so the handout, there's a little QR code here. And actually, it's a link to the Google Doc of the handout. So you can more easily click on the links. Because these are links, so you don't have to type them all out. Alright. So now we're going to go into our last IDE, which is Visual Studio. So Visual Studio is an amazing IDE for C++. and it's often used for app development and for Windows app development and game development. I know, what is it? Unity now uses C+ or Visual Studio instead of the IDE they were using before, which is super cool. Visual Studio is highly customizable. It supports many languages. You can use it on Mac and Windows. So if you're a Mac user, you can use Visual Studio, which is super cool. Sorry, Linux users. And it also has extensions, which is one of the things that make Visual Studio so powerful is its extensions. So here's some examples of extensions. So there's one I use a lot, the Visual Micro, which is an Arduino extension, so I can plug in my little Arduino circuit board and program Arduino using Visual Studio with bypassing the Arduino IDE altogether, which is super cool. And so without further ado, I'd like us to open up Visual Studio on your lab computers. We're gonna do some C++ coding, so you guys can get some experience under your belt, rather than me just talking about it. So let's see. So log into the lab computers. Yeah? You can't log in? I'll let you log in. So when you do open Visual Studio, it'll ask you for credentials. So you guys already have an account, so you don't have to create one, which is super cool. So all you need to do is put in your student ID, followed by @csusb.edu, and then your password.
Not Coyote, right?
Not Coyote. Did you create an account? So I found this out the other day. It's just super cool, because a lot of people, they come into the labs, they try to open Visual Studio, and then they have to create an account, and they're like, oh, I'll use something. So when you're there, let me know, and then I'll make my theme light. So he's using. So here's your. So type in the number @csusb.edu. You're ready to go. All right. We ready? So we're going to create a C++ console application. So I want you guys to go head over to File, at the top left, New, and Project. So we're going to call this Phonebook. And I want you guys to save it on the desktop. Oh yeah, my bad. So on the left here, there will be a bunch of options. Just click Visual C++, click Empty Project. That's what we're going to be using. Title it Phonebook and save it on your desktop. And look at, oh, this is super cool. There's a little button here to create a new Git repository. But we're not going to be doing that. Right? So I'm going to hit OK. Yeah? Alright, so we have nothing. So we're going to create our C++ program. So I want you guys to right click source files. So on the left here, these are our file directories. So this is where all your header files, all your C++ files, all your text files that you're going to be using in your project go. So header files, that's where your header files go. Resource files, that's where, like if you had images, if you had text files, you put them in your resource file. And then source files. So this is where all your CPP files go. So we're going to go ahead and right click source files. We're going to click add, new item, and then we're going to hit CPP at the top. Make sure you have Visual C++ selected. And we're going to title this main.cpp. Hit enter. So we're just going to make a simple hello world application. So we need to type include iOS stream. So we're going to add the iOS stream library in the standard template. Yeah, already the hints are helping. See, if I start typing, you can see the IntelliSense pop up, trying to determine what I'm trying to do. So we're going to type int main. And then I want you guys to add a little something extra right before the return. So we're going to type system pause. So since it's running on a Windows machine, it's already included. Oh, I should make it bigger. Sorry. And then we're going to just see out hello world. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is run this, and then I'm going to go over some of the features in Visual Studio so you guys can get familiar with what is going on. So to run this, we first need to build it. So I want you guys to head over to the build button at the top. We're just going to hit build solution. And if no errors pop up, you did good. It's a build solution. There's what?
What's the difference?
Build Phonebook. I'm not exactly sure what Build Phonebook is. There's a lot of features in this IDE that you probably will never use. How are you doing, Cigar? Is this good? So,
You have some extra visual things that are.
oh yeah, so I have little arrows that show me where the tabs are, and little dots that show me where the spaces are. I forget off the top of my head, but there's a shortcut to remove it, but maybe I should remove it. But let's not worry about it. So to run your program, just hit debug and start without debugging. And the console window will pop up and say hello world. So that's something that's different about Visual Studio, is that instead of outputting it at the very bottom here, it will actually open up a little console window. We good? You get it to run, Seth?
Yep.
Alright. So I'll wait for
It's a
him.
little square.
What, square? Oh, this? Oh, this just tells you where something ends. These are visual cues like the dot and the arrow. Let me see if I can't look up that command. Alright, so I'll remove it. But if you guys did want to enable that, you just hit Control R and then Control W. But I'll remove that for now because it's kind of in the way. Alright, did you get it to run? Alright, so now we're going to go over what all the heck these buttons are. So, if you look here, these two buttons, they just navigate to where your cursor was. So if you look, you can see my cursor moving where your location was. It's a button to create a new project. That one just opens a file, so if you had a file you want to load in, you click that. This saves your file. This saves all your files. It's not just the one you're looking at. This undoes changes, so I got rid of that space, and I can undo and redo changes. Super cool. And then this is just debugging. So if I wanted to debug, I could click on this button right here. But we're not going to do that right now. This is a button to find in your files any keyword. So if there's like a specific variable, maybe you called it like minimum value, and you need to find every instance of minimum value, you click on this, type in what you're searching for, and it'll open up every file that contains that keyword, which is super cool. So I'm not sure what this does, but so this one's a really cool thing. So if you wanted to quick comment, like I was showing you before in the features of IDEs, you could click on this button. So if you all you need to do is highlight what you want to comment out, and then click this comment out the selected lines. It'll comment it out. And then if you wanted to undo it, you could click this to undo it. And there are also key commands for that. So if you hover over this, it'll tell you what the key command is. So in this instance, it's Control K, Control K, C, and Control KU to undo. So that's what these two are. They're commenting buttons. And then, so this one is a toggle a bookmark. So if you have a really big file, you have a lot of code to keep track of, this is where bookmarks come into play. So you can bookmark an item or a line so you can go back to it later, which is very helpful because maybe you have like 20 files you have to navigate through. The bookmark will it'll hold a record of all your bookmarks just like a regular book. So if you look at the bottom here, there's a bookmark tab that'll show you all your bookmarks, so you can easily navigate to and back and forth between them. And then that's what these buttons are at the top. They just move forward and backwards through your bookmarks, and then you can clear all bookmarks. Super simple. And then over here we have the Solution Explorer. This is the directory. If you can right click your project and open folder in File Explorer. So if you right click your project and open it in File Explorer, you'll see your Visual Studio application. So this is where all your CPP files and header files are, all your text files are. If you wanted to open your project up, because we saved it on our desktop, right? If you wanted to open your project up without having to open up Visual Studio, all you would have to do is, see, this is my project that I saved. All you need to do is click on this .sln. It's a short for solution. And it'll open up your project, that's something very helpful. I think I have two open. Yep. Just gonna close that one. Alright, and then, so this is where we can add all our files, and then you can minimize this. So if you click this, it's like a tack at the top, it'll hide it, but it won't go away forever. Yeah?
I'll put the source files with source code header files where you want header files. What is resource file? What is that? What is that for?
Resource files. So if you're creating like an application that requires images, it requires text files, usually you would put all those files in your resource files so you can separate from your CPP and header file. So if you had to access, like maybe you want your application to have an icon every time you open it at the top left, you put the icon in the resource files.
Okay.
So all other files pretty much. Alright, so, and you can change where any of these are. I know some people like to have their Solution Explorer on the right side. You can just pick it up, drag it, wherever you want, which is very cool. Very customizable, very user-friendly. This is meant to help you, not hurt you. So, I think this is supposed to go here for me. So why did I add the system pause? So if you're using gedit and C++ and for your lab in the computer science class, you won't need system pause. I only put it here because we created an empty project, so Visual Studio actually doesn't know that this is a console application. So if we wanted to run this application without system pause, it would flash the console and disappear. It wouldn't pause the console. So if we remove that and click Start Without Debugging, you can see the console it popped up and disappeared. So we don't want that. So there's only two ways I know of preventing it from closing, and one of them is system pause, and the other is to go to Project, Properties, Linker, System, and then set the subsystem to console. It's a lot of steps, so I would just recommend you use system pause. And then when you're turning your assignment in for a class, just remove system pause. Alright, so now that we know we've successfully created a C++ console application in Visual Studio, we're going to do something a bit more advanced. I'm going to show off debugging to you, how easy it can be. So I want you guys to head over to the CSUSB or CSE website. So just type cse.csusb.org. This is our club's website. Under Services, Workshop Documents, at the very bottom you'll see some code snippets that I put in. So I want you guys to grab the exercise 1 code snippet. So again, that's cse.csusb.org, under Services, Workshop Documents. And then I want you guys to grab the exercise 1 code. So just grab it and copy it over into your application. So you guys can just delete the hello world and paste the code in. So this code, so we're going to debug through this code. When we try to compile this code, it will, oh no, did I fix it? Okay, so it succeeds, but it should break when we run it. So let's try to run it. Alright. So when we try to run this code, it breaks, and we don't know why. It built successfully, right? When we hit build solution, oh, I guess it didn't. So, and there are no errors. So how will we find the issue in this little program? So one thing we can do is debugging. Debugging is amazing. You'll probably spend 50% of your time as a code developer debugging. So this is a very useful skill. So to debug in Visual Studio, all you need to do is set a breakpoint. So we're going to set a breakpoint at this int iterations just by clicking on the left right here. And this red circle will appear. So that's a breakpoint. So that's where when we hit start debugging, the application will halt and just stay at that line of code and not continue. So we set a breakpoint, and we're going to hit debug, start debugging, or F5. So now we're in the debugger view. So you can see the whole layout changed. Just ignore everything over here. That's not really important. All we care about is this window, and then the buttons at the top. So if you look at the top, you'll see that the buttons changed. Now we have this stop button, this restart button, this show next statement button, this step into button, this step over button. So the one we care about most is step over, step out, and step into. So these 3 buttons will let us traverse through our code. So we can see on the bottom left, in this window, this is where all like the variables we created, all the functions we're running, this is where we can see all the values. So if we click step over up here, we can see the little arrow move down one, and our program detected that we set an int called iterations to 10. And right here we can see that iterations does in fact equal 10. And then we have 2 other variables that we're getting to, but it looks like they haven't been defined, so arbitrary random numbers have been thrown into them. But if we step once more, they'll be defined. So this is a for loop. So we're trying to find an error within the for loop. And something very cool is, so this automatically will grab variables in your code so you can look at them while you step through your code. If you wanted to grab a specific variable, all you need to do is highlight that, right click it, and then there's this little add watch button. And you just click on it, and a watch tab, there'll be a watch tab that contains all the variables that you're trying to watch. So, and this works not just for variables, but for combinations of variables. So if I wanted to watch I divided by j, I could add that. If I wanted to watch iterators divided by 2 minus 1, I could add that. Super cool, right? So we're going to add those to our watch. And we're going to add j and I. Oops. So now we have a bunch of variables that we want to keep track of, so we can figure out what exactly is going on. So we're going to step through our code and see, okay, we can see that I is 0, yeah, and it loops once, now I is 1, and j is 3. We loop again, see I divided by j, I is 2, j is 2, so it should be 1, which is correct. So we loop again, I is 3, j is 1, so 3 divided by 1 is 3, it's the correct answer. And then loop again. Ooh, so it looks like here I is 4, but j is 0. So we might have found our problem. So 4 divided by 0 is going to break your program. So, and we'll see that as we step over. So we step over, Visual Studio will actually tell us, hey, there's an exception, there's an error, unhandled exception at this location in Phonebook, integer division by 0. So we didn't actually need to debug through this. We could have started debug mode without a breakpoint, and Visual Studio would have told us our problem right away. But debugging through it ourselves helps us visualize what's actually going on, so we can get a better understanding of our code and figure out what's wrong with it. And in terminal, debugging is a lot more difficult because they don't have all these buttons and features, which is why Visual Studio is so awesome. So if we wanted to get out of debugging, all we need to do is click this stop debugging. So we're going to stop debugging. So then we can go into our code and fix it. So we can make an if statement. So if j is equal to 0, we're just going to break. Oops. So that should fix our problem where we divide I by 0. So if we run our code, we go debug, start without debugging. We can see it ran successfully. Yay! We found the problem and we solved it. Oops. Okay. So the next thing I want to go over is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with classes. Have you ever coded with classes before? Classes? Alright, so I'm going to show you some really cool features using classes. So I want you guys to highlight this and just delete it. And we're going to create a phone book. So classes in Visual Studio. So I want you guys to right-click source files, click Add, New Item, and this time we're not going to collect CPP. We're not going to select header. We're going to collect C++ class. And we are going to title it Phonebook. So, and then once you've done that, click Add, and then you can see that it's going to generate a header file for us. It's going to generate a CPP file for us. And we're just going to hit OK. And this is super cool because normally, like in Vim or gedit, you would have to type all this out, but in Visual Studio, it generates it for you. So it already created a public for us. It already defined the class for us. We can see that it created a default constructor in the CPP file and a default destructor. So these are all generated for us, and that's nice and all. But we're going to go to our website and copy and paste the code that I've already created for you guys. So I want you guys to head back to cse.csusb.org under workshops. Under services, workshop documents. At the very bottom, there should be a phonebook.h code snippet. So just grab all the code in there and paste it. And then grab all the code for the .cpp file. Oh, did I not include the main? Oh yeah, I did. And then there's the main, so grab the main as well. The main.cpp. Alright. Everyone with me? Pretty good? Yeah? If you guys wanted to change your Visual Studio to look like mine, all you need to do is go to, where is it? Tools, Options, at the very top. So if you guys want to change your Visual Studio to look like mine, because I know you guys have a bit different theme, go to Tools, Options, at the very top under Environment, there's a General tab, and you can select a theme. So there's a nice dark theme that I like to use a lot, but right now I'm using the light theme. And I think you guys are set to the blue theme. So I'm just going to stick with that. Alright, so this is our main program. So let's try to digest what exactly is going on here. So we have a class called Book1. We have a value called Book1 that is of the Phonebook class. So let's go to our Phonebook header file. So we can see our Phonebook has a default constructor and a default destructor. Those aren't too important right now. We're not going to focus on that. We have a function called addPerson that takes in a string and a phone number. the name of the person and the phone number of that person. And then we have a function called findPerson that finds a person. And then in private we have a vector. So you guys familiar with vectors? So vector is like a list. Just think of it as a list for now. It's a scalable list. So if you know what an array is, it's pretty much a scalable array. So you can make it bigger and smaller depending on how many people you have or how many items you have. So we created a list or a vector of type person called book, and then person is a struct. So all a person is it just contains two strings, name and phone number. So that's all we care about these people. And then we have a function called printPerson. And so one really cool thing about Visual Studio is that, say we have a lot of files, say they're even closed, and we wanted to change this function void add person, but we didn't want to go searching for it. All you need to do is right click it and hit either go to definition or peek definition. So peek definition is pretty cool. What it'll do is it'll open up a little code snippet right below whatever we're looking at. So it actually opened up directly to the add person function, so we can see what's going on. We can edit it here. We don't even have to leave the phonebook.h file, but if we wanted to, we could click on this little promote to document button, and it'll take us to the CPP file, it'll take us to that function so we can start coding. So let's do that. So we can see here that add person it creates a person, sets their name and their phone number, and then it adds it to that list, that book list, the book vector. So that's all add person does. So we're going to go back to main, and we're going to see what this code does. We don't know what this does, so let's look at it. So we have add person, we added somebody named Rufus, George, and Bob, and then we found a person. So we know what add person does. It just adds them to the list, right? But we don't know what find person does. Let's go back. So all you need to do is right click this, go to definition. So we right clicked that, we went to definition. So now we're going to see what exactly find person does. So it looks like it loops through that book for however the size of book is, which was the vector, and it searches for the name that's equal to the name we're searching for, and then it prints that name. So now we know what it does. So in theory, when we run this code, we should see Bob's information printed out. Yeah. So let's build and debug. Start without debugging our code. So as you can see, Bob's name and his phone number was printed out. So that's exactly what we expected, which is good. But now we want to create a new function. Say we want to print out everyone in the phone book. So I want to show you guys how to create a function super easily in Visual Studio. So now that we kind of understand what Phonebook is and what it's doing, hopefully it's not scary to you guys, we are going to create a function. So the function we want to create, so we want it to print everyone in the phone book out. So it doesn't need to return anything. So we can just give it a void return type, and we'll just call it print book. And it doesn't need to take in any input because we're not searching for anyone. It's just going to print everyone out. So after we type that function in, we can see, oh, there's a green squiggly. Visual Studio detected something. It says function definition for print book not found. So this is the real-time error checking in play. So it's different than syntax highlighting. So the syntax is completely correct, but it detects something. So it detects that we don't actually have this function in our CPP file. So if we wanted to add it super easily, all we had to do was click the little light bulb icon right next to it, and it has the commands to do it yourself. So you don't have to actually click it. You could type these commands, or you could click on the light bulb. So we're going to click on the light bulb, and it says create definition of print book in Phonebook. So it'll actually create that definition for us, so we don't have to do it ourselves. So all that coding is generated for us. So, oh, and you can see that it opened up a little code snippet within our header file. So if we wanted to actually go to that file, or we could edit it here, it doesn't matter. But let's actually open it up. So just hit the promote to document button, and it'll open up the CPP file. So what do we want print book to do? Just print out all the files. Oh yeah, there's a lab in here, right? So we're going to create a for loop. And then we're going to call upon the function we already created called print person. And then in main, we're going to call upon print book. So what this should do is just print out everyone in the Phonebook. And it did exactly that. So print out Rufus, George, and Bob. That's what we wanted. Should we wrap it up? Alright, so that's all the time we have for today. Since there's a lab coming in, I'm going to cut it short. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me anything in the club room. Thank you all for coming.